Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. And first of all, let me say Happy New Year. We ran a tape yesterday, but we're live now for the rest of the week. And I hope you enjoyed your Christmas vacation and your New Year's experience. And we are now back into 2017. Going to be talking about a lot of issues in the first hour here today. Of course, first day of Congress, opening day, which is interesting. You know, opening day in baseball is kind of a lot of fun. Opening day in Congress, as I'll talk about in just a minute, is sort of pandemonium. But we have elected a Speaker of the House. No real surprise there. We'll get into some of the various issues that Congress will be trying to address. We have Julian Assange saying that, you know, this WikiLeaks was not due to the Russians. So all this comment about Russian hacking, it may be true, but it has nothing to do with the WikiLeaks. And so we'll get into some of that in just a minute. And then we'll get into a 60-minute segment dealing with crime. You know, we've talked about this from time to time, how we are in some respects seeing how the events that have transpired over the last 2 years, the so-called Ferguson effect, have really affected police officers. And if you saw the 60-minute segment, whether you did or not, we're going to talk about that, really talks about the shootings and the killings and the murder rate in Chicago and puts almost all the blame on the police. Well, I think there are some other things that we need to look at there as well. And so we'll get into some of those topics. And, of course, at any point, I'll welcome your phone calls in the first hour. Second hour, we're going to have Robert Dickie with us. He is the president of Crown Financial Ministries. He's been in the studio with us before talking about his book, The Leap, Launching Your Full-Time Career and a Part-Time Economy. Talking about this new book that kind of picks up where that one left off, Love Your Work. And as many of us, as we get into this new year, make New Year resolutions, I know some of you may just say, I'm really not thrilled with the job that I have, or maybe there's an outside enterprise I could be involved with, and I'd like to know how to do that. He's going to give some really good advice to that as well. But let's first of all focus on the important political news, and that has to do with today being the first day for Congress. And I love what Chad Pergam says. He said it's to the uninitiated, the first day of each Congress resembles a caffeinated kindergarten under substitute teacher rule the day before summer vacation. That's a great world picture. If nothing else, it's a little crazy because, first of all, many of the members of Congress, especially if they're new members of Congress, but even the old ones too, they bring everybody. I mean, we're talking about bringing friends, neighbors, family members, soccer team, whatever. They're all making their way through Congress. Of course, the first order of business is to pick a speaker. And, of course, we had a pretty good idea of who that would be, Paul Ryan, again. And but the way they do it, I thought it would be helpful for you to understand, is that you put people in nomination. And so Nancy Pelosi's in nomination, and then Paul Ryan is in nomination, and they go through the roll call alphabetically. And Paul Ryan got all but one of the Republican votes. Nancy Pelosi had a few that didn't. And every once in a while, people call out some other name like Tim or Colin Powell or, you know, whatever, you know. And anyway, they tallies it up. And, of course, no surprise there. The person that tallies it up is the most senior member of Congress, and that's John Conyers out of Michigan. And so at least today, Congress starts with 435 members in the House and, of course, 100 members in the Senate. But that will change almost instantaneously because you have Representative Tom Price, who, though he was sworn in and actually will serve until he is confirmed, is selected to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Representative Ryan Zinke, who we were supposed to have on just the other day until Donald Trump tapped him, and that was the end of that. Representing Montana, he has been tapped to be the Interior Secretary. You can talk about Representative Mike Pompeo. He also is going to be the CIA director. We go down that list. And then, as I mentioned, when you get to the Senate, you have at least Senator Jeff Sessions from Alabama, who will serve there until he becomes Attorney General. And some will perhaps leave Congress to take on a full-time responsibility outside of government. You have Representative Keith Ellison, the Democrat from Minnesota, who has been running to be the head of the Democratic National Committee. That vote actually isn't until February, but he said that if indeed he does, he will quit his House position to actually run the Democratic National Committee. It was happening today, and as we talk about, has about 2.5 weeks before he becomes the president. But here, I think, illustrate if you couldn't pass the legislation, because you're president, you can make some cases, and that has an influence on policy. Well, at the moment, Donald Trump is still not president, but he does have a bully pulpit of a Twitter account, and also the fact that he is the incoming president. So let me give you two good illustrations before we take a break, and then we'll get into some other stories. And the first is that today Ford announced that it's canceling plans to build a new plant in Mexico. It will invest instead $700 million in Michigan, and that should create an additional 700 new jobs in Michigan. The Ford CEO, Mark Field, said the investment is a vote of confidence in the pro-business environment created by Donald Trump. He also stressed that Ford did not have any special deal with the president-elect. But again, we're talking about a $700 million investment, which will go to Flat Rock, Michigan, to produce some of these electric cars and some of these self-driving cars. And you've got to say the U-turn has to be due to Donald Trump, because he has repeatedly said, even when he was candidate Donald Trump, that if indeed they were going to send those jobs to Mexico, he would slap them with a 35% tariff. And so they had originally last year announced a $1.6 billion investment in Mexico to transfer production of the Ford Focus from Michigan to Mexico in order to save cost. Then they said, well, they would also perhaps move the Focus as well as some of the other various kinds of brands there as well. But when Donald Trump kept saying that he would slap a 35% tariff on Ford vehicles made in Mexico, that's why you have the U-turn. Another one that relates to Congress today, interestingly enough, is Donald Trump in a tweet complained that the Republicans were going to actually change the nature of the Independent Office of Congressional Ethics. And so in his tweet, he said, with all that Congress has to work on, do they really have to make the weakening of the independent ethics watchdog, as unfair as it might be, their number one priority? Focus on tax reform, health care, and so many other things of greater importance. When I read about this morning, I thought, I wonder what the Republicans would do. Well, I didn't have to wait very long. The Republicans decided that they would not focus on that. And if nothing else, it illustrates that even when you're not the president of the United States, but you are at least the president-elect, even when you have not been officially verified, which won't happen until technically Friday, nevertheless, on two separate occasions, the Ford decision and the decision by the Republicans not to pursue the change on the Independent Office of Congressional Ethics, Donald Trump is having an influence. Agree or disagree, nevertheless, it shows that it's a new kind of administration coming in, and maybe a lot of things that we'll be talking about here on Point of View. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll focus on a few other very important stories before us, and of course, we'll welcome your phone calls. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, freedom of association has been an issue in so many of the religious liberty cases over the last few years. Should a baker, florist, or photographer be required to perform their artistic services for an event that is contrary to their moral stance? In most of these cases, government officials say that a person's moral objections to same-sex marriage cannot be a justification. If someone disagrees with what a homosexual or lesbian couple believes and wants to do, too bad. You must be forced to do something that violates your conscience. If you do not, you face fines and even bankruptcy. It is worth keeping this in mind as we now witness the reactions from people who do not want to participate in the inauguration of Donald Trump. Ben Shapiro talks about the social media reaction when the Radio City Rockettes were told they had to perform at the Trump inauguration. One Rockette complained about being forced to perform for a man that stands for everything we're against. She concluded with this statement, "We're not going to be forced." George Takei complained on Twitter that they were being forced to go along with something horrible that they did not choose. We can add to these comments other statements by prominent figures that they won't eat at a restaurant hosted by Trump Tower, and they won't stay in a Trump hotel. Fashion icon Andre Leon Talley announced that he wouldn't dress Melania anymore. Now, Ben Shapiro writes that suddenly the left has discovered the concept of freedom of association. After years of telling religious people they had a moral and legal obligation to throw out their religion and serve same-sex weddings, provide contraception, and fund abortion, the left now realizes that their ability to pick and choose those to whom they give their services is actually quite vital. reactions to the Trump inauguration provide some important examples of why freedom of association is important. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we're back again. Welcome to 2017. Let me just first of all say thank those of you that have supported this ministry in 2016, and we certainly appreciate your financial support. And as we move into 2017, still need your financial support. I'll have more to say about that in just a minute. But as we look at the first day of Congress, we already see that Donald Trump suggested and the Republican leadership agreed, maybe begrudgingly, but nevertheless agree that maybe revamping the Independent Council of Congressional Ethics is not the highest priority. So what is the highest priority? Well, I don't have to look very far. Jim DeMint, who is a former member of Congress, matter of fact, a former senator from South Carolina, and now is the head of the Heritage Foundation, said, Obamacare repeal must be on day one. Congress has no excuses. He said in less than 3 weeks' time, Donald Trump becomes the next president. So he said it's fitting that Trump has committed to repealing and replacing one of his predecessor's most infamous, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, but he won't be able to do it to sign into law. What he said is, don't wait for for Inauguration Day. There's no excuse not to do so. And then he goes through in a little piece there where he reminds us of Nancy Pelosi, who I just mentioned a minute ago, 8 years ago, told us that we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. And then, of course, the architect of Obamacare, Jonathan Gruber, revealed in the stupidity of the American voter and the lack of transparency that allowed the bill to pass. So this is the bill that is now going to be front and center for the attention of this Congress. And Jim DeMint gives lots, and again, we can post this a little bit later if you'd like to read it, reasons why this should be changed. Gives us lots of reasons. For example, many thousands of Americans have lost their insurance plans or their doctors, or they're seeing their premiums hiked up to unbelievable levels. 17 of the original 23 Obamacare insurance co-ops have collapsed. The massive centralization of health insurance has hurt patients and providers alike. And he says, and of course, there's also been the rotten, unconstitutional core of Obamacare. So he says that this is something that needs to be done. That's what he's calling for. And the argument always a procedure that's used to deal with budget bills. And so that certainly would be the case. And to be fair, this hasn't been the first time Congress has tried to repeal the Obamacare legislation of the Affordable Care Act. It has voted 60 times to repeal all or certain kinds of roadblocks. And so then he concludes by saying, interestingly enough, that doesn't mean that we won't see foot dragging from some in Congress. He said, when I was in the Senate, they would use every excuse to avoid fighting for conservative principles. Wait until we get the House. He says, done. Then wait until we get the Senate. Done. Wait until we get the White House. Done and done. He says once again, there is simply no alternatives left but to repeal Obamacare and win the fight, a shocking prospect for some. Now, fortunately, he says Republicans can't afford to throw conservatives under the bus on Obamacare repeal. Republicans have consistently campaigned on repealing Obamacare and won. It's a promise that must be kept. And then goes on to talk about what this will mean over the next couple of weeks. So we'll be watching this first day of Congress. Not much takes place except a lot of people get their pictures taken. A lot of people are sworn in. A few, kind of perfunctory acts are done. But now, by tomorrow, hopefully Congress will get down to business. So we'll see where that fits. And by the way, if you'd like to join us, let's open up the phones. 1-800-351-1212. I've already talked about how the Bully pulpit has been used a few times by Donald Trump. One, to force Ford to cancel its Mexican plant and to keep jobs and actually create jobs in Michigan instead of Mexico. The attempt to rein in the Republican Congress right now so that they would not revamp the Ethics Oversight Committee, and, of course, this issue of Obamacare. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Before we get into the 60 Minutes piece, I thought I'd put a few other things on the table. One of those has to do with whether or not this Russian hacking, which has now resulted in the removal of many Russian diplomats from the United States, had anything to do with the election. And in an interview the other night with Sean Hannity, Julian Assange, who is the founder of WikiLeaks, was very clear in saying that WikiLeaks did not come from the Russian government. Here's the direct quote. He says, "We can say, and we have said repeatedly, that over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it's not the state party." And then he goes on a little bit later to say, "Our publications had wide uptake by the American people. They're all true. But that's not the allegation being presented by the Obama White House. So why such a dramatic response? Well, the reason is obvious. They're trying to delegitimize the Trump administration as it goes into the White House." And he goes on to make some other statements. Now, I recognize Julian Assange may not be the most unimpeachable source, but again, on numerous occasions, he has continually said that these leaks that supposedly the reason that Hillary Clinton lost and Donald Trump won are not due to the Russian government. There may be Russian hacking for sure, but it wasn't Russian hacking that generated the WikiLeaks that exposed the American people to some of this information. And I've always found it kind of interesting that those who have tried to argue that WikiLeaks was such a devastating impact on the election seem to be arguing that actually those particular leaks should not have happened. And if you watched Tucker Carlson the other night, he had somebody on and he was saying, okay, explain to me which one of those leaks that we had from the Clinton administration, the Clinton campaign, and those kinds of individuals, and Podesta, that you honestly think should not have been revealed. And of course, they couldn't come up with any. So I think it's a good, difficult argument to make that we wish some of the kinds of things that were said internally inside the Clinton campaign. So I thought it was kind of interesting, but nevertheless, that is one of those issues on the table. We'll continue to, of course, monitor the vote that took place, as we mentioned, last week and even on Friday on the United Nations. But before we take some phone calls, let me put one more piece on the table. Certainly some state legislatures, but also is going to probably usher in a few more right-to-work laws, the power to choose or pay. Missouri and New Hampshire last month mansions or the state legislatures, which have previously defeated right-to-work legislation, end up being 9 states very easily. And so again, those that are in favor of right-to-work laws argue that they force unions to become more accountable to their members and make states more attractive to companies looking to move. Of those who oppose right-to-work legislation say that they only harm union membership. But if you begin to look at some of the situations here, you can see that these changes are dramatic. And Kentucky is one of those because they said that when actually Indiana, which is Kentucky's neighbor to the north, passed a right-to-work law in 2012, that suddenly got the attention of those in the state capitol. And a lot of people are now talking a lot more about the way in which you might want to change some of those laws. And so we have 26 states that have right-to-work laws. Maybe it'll be up to 29. Let's go to Arkansas first. Wendy, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hi. I have a question about the what Obama did at the UN by not vetoing.
Sure. Yeah, I'm coming to a break, so let me try to answer that when we come back from the break. But again, that's something we talked about last week, but it is one that maybe deserves a little more attention, and so that'll be the next item on my agenda. So what about that vote? Why did we abstain? What is that going to mean? It is UN Resolution 2443, and so we'll talk about that and give you a chance to ask some more questions, and then we're going to get into the 60 Minutes piece on Chicago. But just as we take a break, even though we're into this new year, we still need your financial support. So let me encourage you to visit the website, pointofview.net. And if you appreciate the kind of conversation even today we're having, it's not too late to support this ministry. As a matter of fact, it's a good way to start out the new year. So visit Point of View and click on that button that says donate. It's a way for you to join our conversation and also to support this ministry. Let's take a break, though. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about that UN vote. And we'll talk about 60 Minutes and their piece on the shootings in Chicago. All that coming up right after this.
I remember when I could take a family of 4 out for a simple dinner, and the bill came to around $10 for all of us. That was only about 15 years ago, believe it or not. Now, no way. But here and there, we still go out because it's kind of important to us as a family. Well, I believe that Point of View is important, an important investment in all of our families. This is a unique and special time together each weekday. Kerby equips us to make a difference and keeps us aware of what's important to our families. Today, I urge you, many are watching from the sidelines. We need you in the game. Some give. If that's you, thank you. Many need to step up. Join the team, Truth Team 360. You can learn the details at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, click on Become a Monthly Partner. That's right next to the Donate Now button. Become a Monthly Partner. We need you on the team. Please join us. Pointofview.net. Or pick up the phone, call 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We've talked about the first day of Congress, what its agenda may be over the next couple of weeks, as well as the use of the bully pulpit by Donald Trump before he's even become president. And then Wendy asked a very good question about the Israel vote, the UN vote there, by the United States not vetoing it. Before we get into the details, sometimes it's interesting to see what people have said about that. And on the program last week, I spent some time quoting from a number of individuals. First of all, Alan Dershowitz, who refers to himself as a progressive or as a liberal. Even he said, many liberal Democrats like me support his domestic policy, but we were appalled that the president actually had these kinds of ideas when it came to foreign policy. Talked about the fact that he once visited the president in the White House and asked for his support of, and that the president said, I have Israel's back. But Alan Dershowitz said, I didn't realize that what President Obama meant is that he would have their back, and that is he would stab them in the back. That comes from Alan Dershowitz. Or, of course, you can go to John Bolton, who I think really should have become cabinet, maybe even Secretary of State, or going back to being UN ambassador again. But nevertheless, in his piece, Obama's parting betrayal of Israel, I think that tells you enough about why he was concerned, and also pointing out that this resolution 2334 implicitly repeals the resolution 242, which is the one that we've had for many years. And this, I think, illustrates that now it's really claiming that any Israeli that lives in this so-called disputed territory is essentially a criminal, and that this is going to be a real issue in the future. And a lot of this is an attempt to try to bring about a two-state solution. And that's what last Wednesday, outgoing Secretary of State John Kerry argues for, a two-state solution. But there's always been a problem with this idea of a two-state solution, because if it weren't for the Israeli military right now kind of holding the Arab majorities surrounding Israel at bay, then those in these territories would be able to drive Jews into the sea. And that's a direct quote from the charter of Hamas. Hamas is, of course, that radical Islamic terrorist organization that many Palestinians support. And so what is happening right now, and has been happening for some time, there's some of the Jewish people looking for land. They are buying land that they've paid for from Arabs that own that land, and then been able to build a home or an apartment complex in the West Bank or East Jerusalem. This shouldn't really be a problem for a two-state solution, because there's only a few Jews in those areas, and if there was a two-state solution, they would still be a very tiny minority compared to all the Palestinians, so it wouldn't cause a problem. After all, let's recognize, if you've ever gone to Israel, and maybe someday we'll have another trip to Israel here that Point of View will bring, you can go to the Knesset and you see that there are actually Arab contingents who are Israeli citizens. So that works fine in Israel, where you have both Jews and Arabs in the Knesset, and there is actually a very small percentage of Jews that would be part of some kind of government in the West Bank. So you can see that that's not really the problem. But back to even the idea of tourism, I picked this up the other day from Jim Dennison. He says, if you really look at what we are talking about right now, this particular resolution, 2334, basically applies not only to these West Bank settlements, but to the historic Jewish areas taken by Jordan and liberated by Israel. So that means that theoretically, if you understand the resolution, it says that now the Jews would have no right to the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, even the places where a lot of tourists go, like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Jewish quarter of the Old City, all are part of East Jerusalem and under the scope of this resolution. So if there was any example of a far-reaching policy and resolution that should have been vetoed by the United States, it is this particular one. And it's an illustration of one of the reasons why Senator Lindsey Graham the other day said, quote, as a chairman of the Subcommittee on Foreign Operations of the Senate Appropriations Committee, I oversee the United States assistance to the United Nations. The United States is currently responsible for approximately 22% of the United Nations total budget. And so he went on in another statement to say, if the United Nations moves forward with this ill-conceived resolution, I will work to form a bipartisan coalition to suspend or significantly reduce the United States assistance to the United Nations. So for those reasons and many others, that I hope answers Wendy's question. If you have some more, feel free to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. But I did want to get one more in before the top of the hour, and that is that the Sunday evening 60 Minutes aired a segment called Crisis in Chicago. And I've been receiving all sorts of email blasts from a number of individuals that felt that it was an unfair piece. But more importantly, let's, if we can, think this through. And I'd love to hear from some of you that are in law enforcement, because this is something we've talked about before when we've had individuals on, for example, talking about the so-called Ferguson effect or policing or the rest. The Chicago Tribune points this out, that if you look at this, they tallied at least 781 homicides for the year. Chicago police had a 762, but that's because they did not count homicides where a person was killed in self-defense or death investigations. But the 60 Minutes crew decided to spend 6 days in Chicago. During that time, they were there. This is just 6 days, not even a full week. There were 55 shooting victims, 16 died of their wounds. And so a lot of the investigation had to do with a couple of individuals that were doing some of the research, and one of them that they interviewed was part of Chicago's crime issue is that the police officers feel that they are under attack. His successor is Superintendent Eddie Johnson, who tried to dispel the notion that police officers may be taking a more lax stance because of the additional scrutiny, and that's been kind of the argument being made by Heather McDonald in the so-called Ferguson effect. But he certainly said that the drop in police stops were due to more stringent standards brought about by pressure from the American Civil Liberties Union. And so this is one of the things that illustrates how dangerous it's become in Chicago. Now, the CBS producer, interestingly enough, when he was brought to Chicago to do the story, was told that he should wear a bulletproof vest while filming this. And he said he declined to do so. He, quote, said, "It bothered me that I had to wear body armor in an American city. That really bothered me. We're not talking about a third world country. We're not talking about some war zone in the Middle East. We're talking about Chicago, Illinois." But I have to say it's almost the same thing. Here is something else to talk about. This piece that appeared in the Wall Street Journal said President Obama plans a farewell speech next week in Chicago. By the way, that's one that he's going to give outside of Washington, D.C., which is kind of unusual. Normally, the president gives their farewell speech in Washington, and then they leave Washington. He's going to do just the opposite. He's going to give his farewell speech in Chicago, and he's going to stay in Washington. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But nevertheless, the Chicago Police Department, again, reported 762 homicides in 2016, the most in 2 decades and more than in the cities of New York and Los Angeles combined. The 57% increase was the biggest spike in 60 years. Shootings jumped 46% to 3,500, with more occurring in poor and minority neighborhoods on the south and west sides. And police have blamed gang activity, as most victims have previously been identified for their gang ties or past arrest. Now let's come back to that ACLU, the American Civil Liberties requirement. They also have targeted Chicago police, and the department in August 2015 agreed to track investigatory stops and pat-downs to avert a lawsuit. So then the officers must actually submit a 2-page report for each stop, which then a federal judge and the ACLU will review for bias. You can see how that has a tremendous impact on the opportunity for policing. And I think it was interesting in the 60 Minutes piece at one point, one of the individuals doing the interview, Whitaker himself, said it doesn't seem that filling out a 2-page report is that onerous. Well, then the superintendent, Gary McCarthy, described that the 2-page report is for each individual. First of all, it takes about an hour to fill out that 2 pages. And second of all, it's per person. So if an officer were to stop 8 people, they'd have to complete 16 pages of reports before the end of their shift. Doesn't take long to figure out that this ACLU requirement just guarantees that you don't have officers in the field. So it's kind of like, first of all, you restrict the officer's ability to conduct proactive law enforcement. Then you watch the crime increase. And then you blame the officers for not being proactive because they have to fill out all the forms in order to keep the ACLU happy. Love to get your thoughts. Some of you work in law enforcement. What about this? Can we learn some lessons from Chicago, or will this be a preview of coming attractions, things you might see in your own community? Let's take a break, but when we come back, let's take some phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. Be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. A woman in Indiana has attempted to use that state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act to justify her abusive behavior, but it didn't work. Kin Park Thang was charged with neglect of a dependent and battery on a juvenile after allegedly disciplining her children by beating them with a hanger. The beating was necessary, she argued, to ensure that her son would be right with God for his immoral actions. Part of Thang's defense was rooted in the Indiana RFRA, suggesting that the state was substantially burdening her religious exercise by charging her with abuse and neglect for the way she chose to discipline her children. Thankfully, RFRA does not sanction abuse, neglect, or other violent acts. RFRA provides a check on government when its actions substantially burden the free exercise of religion, demanding that the state demonstrate a compelling justification for its actions. There can be little that is more compelling than protecting against the abuse and neglect of children. In other words, RFRA worked. The state was able to easily demonstrate why they were compelled to charge Thang for her abusive behavior, and Thang pled guilty to battery. The next time someone tries to convince you that RFRA laws can protect child abusers, remind them of Thang's story. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
More people today are saying Americans don't really need religion, but America does need religion. Religion helps the economy, families, and even national security. Learn more by reading Saving America, 10 Reasons Religious Freedom is the Key to Our Nation's Future. You can download this free booklet at firstliberty.org/Saving America. That's firstliberty.org/Saving America. Discover 10 ways religion benefits America at firstliberty.org/Saving America.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Like to join a conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Florida next. Karen, I understand you are a former police officer. First of all, thank you for your service. What would you like to add to our conversation?
I would like to add to the fact that a two-page comment on what happened with each individual arrest out there hasn't been that difficult for 25 to 30 years with a good officer. I don't see why filling out the paperwork would hinder them doing their job. It's a lot bigger than that. It's all about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're being reported on. If they're doing what they're supposed to do, it doesn't take long to sit down and fill out 18 blanks on a two-page data paper.
You know, one of the things that some of the others were arguing is that it has to do with what we call the Ferguson effect. But again, if you do a apples to apples comparison back in August of 2015, before they agreed to the ACLU requirement, you had 49,000 stops. A year later, at the same time, you had 8,000. So a drop from 49,000 to 8,000. Something's going on, whether it's the paperwork, whether it's a lack of proactive policing, whether it's they feel that they're under attack. Something's going on, because obviously you can see that the murders are up, the arrests are down, and the stops are down. So obviously something's going on. What do you think it might be?
Well, I agree with that something's going on. Now, whether they're under attack, I doubt that. They don't disrespect the officers any more than they did from the first day they came on board. Usually a good community knows their people. I mean by that, their officers. So if you're out there and you're policing and something happens dramatically, they have people on the street that cartel murders just like they do killings and shootings and break-ins, so to speak. So it didn't go up because they were doing paperwork or lack of the fact that they were in the community. I think it went up really because so many people feel like they can get away with more now and not cost them as much.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the case. You know, I've written about this before. You know, people say crime doesn't pay. Well, I remember one of the studies done for a professor at Texas A&M. He was calculating the possibility of getting caught, the possibility of actually being sentenced, the possibility that you would serve time and how much time you would serve, and the benefit.
Right.
And if you look at the cost benefit, crime really does pay. And that was done years ago. I would imagine even now, where in some respects, some of these gang elements are completely overwhelming the police, that you can get away with it. And interesting enough, during the particular, you brought up a good point. Where was this? Yes, while they were filming one of the interviews here, this was an interview that Whitaker did with Flora White, whose son was killed while greeting a friend on a gang turf. You actually could see in the background drug dealers conducting illegal transactions on the street while the cameras were rolling. And as they pointed out, no police car ever came by. So the brazenness of actually doing that in front of a 60 Minutes camera crew illustrates exactly the point you're making.
I agree upon that, too, as well. When they have people in the community taking money from those same people not to show up, and then they have good officers in the community that says, I want to protect the children that I know, the family members I know in this community. When that happens, the police chief and other people like that get those officers out of the way. They push them down to the curb, and they begin to feel like, why arrest those people when they're going to get back out in the next 5 days?
Yeah.
Or before the pen cools, they're back out on the street. That's a hindrance to them, and you start to feel this after 20 years like myself. You spend that much time on the street. That starts to bother you that the DA and the judges not doing their job when I spend so much time putting my life on the line, staying away from my family to put them in. Fill out those 2 pages, get them got, and turn out at the end of the night, my shift is going off, those people are walking out of the door.
Well, let me at least say thank you for your service, and I know there were probably days when you felt like nobody appreciated what you did. So thank you for calling in today and giving us, if nothing else, a ground-level perspective on what was taking place.
Well, I appreciate your show being on the air. That's the important factor. People that bring out the truth and tell the truth, no one wants to listen to them hardly anymore. Thank you, and have a good evening. Happy New Year, by the way.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I'll get to another caller here in just a minute, but again, if you just joined us, been talking about this 60 Minutes piece on murder and policing in Chicago. It's called Crisis in Chicago. And again, the attempt was to probably place a lot of the blame on at the feet of the police officers. I did notice one thing that was never mentioned, and that is this is probably one of the most gun-regulated cities in America. So if gun control is supposed to reduce crime, you have more murders in Chicago, if I read that right, which is still just hard to believe, than in Los Angeles and New York combined. That's just amazing. Let's go back to the phones real quickly. In Texas, KCTA. Susan, thank you for calling today here on Point of View.
Yes, I had a question about the ACLU requiring to see the paperwork of why do they have the authority to dictate that they have to see and require the paperwork superseding a city council and an elected police chief?
Well, I think that's a good question. Yeah.
Why do I could get with a group and go and try to change my city council and police chief to run the department with my tax money a certain way, and then they would decide. Well, I don't understand just a private group of people requiring that they see something that a local government should direct.
And I think the answer to that is a one-word: intimidation, because the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union in Chicago, targeted the Chicago Police and the Chicago Police Department back in, again, we got to find the key date, and that's August 2015, so it's more than a year ago, and they were actually going to sue, and so rather than go into a lawsuit, they decided to agree to track investigatory stops and pat-downs in order to not file and actually face that lawsuit. So in order to agree to allow them to look at that, then the city and the police department and the police chief and whoever else would be named would not have to face the lawsuit. So it really was intimidation. But I think the question that you're asking is a good one. The people should be able to have the police department, the mayor, the city council accountable. And when you have an outside group, in this particular case, the ACLU, and then, as I pointed out just a minute ago, this is something I just learned, they also have to show it to a judge to evaluate. It strikes me as something, again, we heard a little bit more just a minute ago from the police officer that had been there about the 2-page report. Maybe it wasn't so much the 2-page report, but still, you have a former federal judge and the ACLU has to review that. It seems to me that the oversight, back to what you're saying, should be the mayor and the city council, don't you think? So again, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to move off of some of the topics. We'll continue to follow some of these stories, but I especially wanted to get into that question about police officers, and when you have such an incredible crisis that is unfolded, you've actually had more homicides in Chicago than in the cities of New York and Los Angeles combined. This is not the same city that Barack Obama left 8 years ago, and he will be coming back to next week to give his farewell address. So it is, again, a reason for us to pay attention to some of these trends and to evaluate and reevaluate what's taking place. Let's take a break, though, and when we come back, I'm going to spend some time with Robert Dickie. He's been in studio with us before, talked about his previous book, The Leap, Launching Your Full-Time Career in a Part-Time Economy. He has a new book out called Love Your Work, 4 Practical Ways You Can Pivot to Your Best Career. And I know that especially when we come to the new year, sometimes you make New Year's resolutions. A lot of them have to do with fitness and diet. But I think some of you might say, maybe there's another job out there for me. Or even if I keep this job, maybe there's a way I can use my talents and my time and my skills in a way that might be more fulfilling. So I think you're really going to enjoy his conversation. And of course, we'll open up the phones to give you a chance to join as well. If you appreciate some of the conversation that takes place every day here at Point of View, visit the website. Click on that button that says donate. We are in need of your financial support. And we will come back with Robert Dickie right after this.
The end of the book of Jonah is really strange. God said there were 120,000 people in Nineveh who didn't know their right hand from their left. And yet today in America, many of our major corporations and politicians are fighting a war to permit men to use women's showers and bathrooms. Once you deny God as the measure of all things, you can't even recognize the most basic realities. America is in a battle for its sanity and survival. We need strong voices to tell the truth. We need Point of View. Become a partner in this important mission of speaking truth in love. Please, today is the day. Click the Join the Truth Team button at pointofview.net. Choose your level of giving and be an important part of the team bringing America the truth she so desperately needs. Take that step. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time talking with Robert Dickie. He's been in studio with us before as we've talked about his book, The Leap, Launching Your Full-Time Career in Our Part-Time Economy. And today we're going to talk about this new book, which I think is going to be very helpful for you. Love Your Work, 4 practical ways you can pivot to your best career. Some great resources. And as I said before, as we start out a new year, sometimes we are thinking about New Year's resolutions, and maybe you're thinking, of course, about fitness. We talked to Robert Dickie. He's quite a marathoner, so he knows all about that, and eating and health and all the rest. But sometimes you also think about your future. You know, do I need to stay in the same job? Or even if I do stay in this job, are there some other ways that I can use my gifts and my talents and all sorts of other things that God has given to me so that I can really have a fulfilling life? So I would really encourage you to kind of sit back and listen. But a little bit later, we're going to give you a chance to join the conversation. Robert Dickie, as you well know, is an individual who 5 years ago became the president of Crown Financial Ministries, also a decorated Air Force officer. He was a CEO of an international company and leader of a number of nonprofits, both Christian and non-Christian. He has been married for 18 years, has 5 children, has a master's degree from the University of Arkansas, and has begun the Harvard Business School Executive Education Program. Author, of course, of the earlier book I mentioned, The Leap, and this one, Love Your Work. Robert Dickie, welcome back to Point of View.
Kerby, it's great to start the new year with you. Thank you for having me on your program.
Well, let's, if we can, remind our listeners who maybe are not familiar with your previous one, because you were talking about this idea of launching your full-time career in a part-time economy. As I read your new book, there's a sense in which there's a real significant connection between the two books, aren't there?
There really is. And what happened over the last couple of years as I've been working with people around the country and listening to stories and counseling folks, I realized that there was a little bit of a gap or a question that I didn't answer in The Leap. And so as I started crafting this with the publisher up there in Chicago, Moody Publishers, we really look at this book as a prequel to The Leap. And really going back and answering some of the more foundational questions on, our God-given design. Why is it that we work? Should we be fulfilled in our work? And answering all of those questions in the context of what's happening in the global economy, how is work changing, how is the freelancer economy changing, which then really leads into The Leap, which gives the real practical application of what people can do when they decide that they want to start something on their own.
And I might just mention that we have information about this book, about 200 pages, published by Moody Press. And, of course, again, we have a link to the website, your website, so people can get either or both of the books. And, again, if they can find it in the bookstore, great. But if not, I would encourage people to order it. And, of course, we have a way that they can even download it to their digital devices. And I thought it was interesting that tomorrow we're going to do our Millennial Roundtable. One of those is Allie Beth Stuckey, who actually endorses the book. So I think our millennials need to listen to that, not only today but tomorrow. Of course, Chuck Bentley's been on the program with us many times before. No surprise there, as the CEO of Crown Financial Ministries. So there are a lot of people that we certainly think very highly of that have endorsed your book. So help us think this through, because you start out by even saying that in some respects we are talking to the refugees of the Great Recession. And that is a lot of our younger listeners, especially the millennials, but even those who are the 60-somethings, went through a time where it was really difficult to figure out how to be gainfully employed, especially since the economy was changing so very much.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And so the recession refugees references everyone, like you've said, from the young millennials who in 2008, 2009 entered the worst job market in U.S. history, all the way up to the baby boomers who were thinking about retiring. They were just a few years away. Their retirements got decimated. 401ks got hurt. And now they're looking at a potential encore career where they may retire from their normal job, but they're looking for something else to do in retirement to tide them over, and everyone in between. We see in the newspapers almost on a daily basis that wage growth within the United States is stagnant. Most people are falling behind. And so it's this time of year when people are sitting back, they're taking a look and taking stock of their life, maybe making some New Year's resolutions. They're saying, what are the things that I need to do to be, number one, fulfilled in my job, love the work that I'm doing, feeling like I'm making an impact in the world around me, but also, are there things that I can be doing to have greater opportunity? Because the world's changing so rapidly that if we don't keep our finger on that pulse, it can change quicker than we can adapt. And pretty soon, there's people walk into their jobs on a daily basis and like, okay, the company's been downsized, this job has been outsourced. We don't want to get caught unawares.
Yes, and again, the diagrams in the book are worth the price of the book as well. And again, since it's radio, we can't show those as easily, but one of the diagrams I certainly can describe, and it has to do with the number of years an individual stays in the same employment or even with the same employer. For those who were born before the end of World War II, the builder generation, or even for the early people on maybe the boomer generation, there was an old phrase: you work for General Motors will take care of you. Well, not so much anymore, because the possibility of an individual staying even 5 or 6 years with the same employer has dramatically decreased, especially as we talk about that younger generation. They're sometimes in a position only for a year or two. And so this is a very different kind of economy, in part because they choose to leave. But as you also pointed out a minute ago, sometimes the company leaves you and simply doesn't exist anymore.
That's absolutely right. It's the social contract. Many people have been talking about how this social contract between companies and employees has fundamentally changed. It's been broken. And you referenced it. There was this idea that if you hired in at General Motors or GE, one of these big corporations, that you had a job for life. That is just not the case in today's economy. Companies are very quick to make decisions that are going to influence the bottom line. We see it all the time where companies are shutting down plants in Flint, Michigan, my hometown, moving them overseas. Outsourcing work, that's a big area now in the economy. The freelancer economy is growing, where companies are saying, hey, look, healthcare costs are just too much. So instead of having a full-time employee, how many of our staff members can we have as a freelancer, where we're giving them 30, 35 hours a week of work, not the 4 or the 40, where we have to pay full-time health benefits. So there's all these things that are impacting the workforce today. So that's definitely something to be mindful of.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Robert Dickie. Just an outstanding book, as you might imagine. You've perhaps had a chance to hear the interview with him in studio. He's, of course, with us by phone today. But again, I would encourage you to even go back and listen to that previous interview and, of course, stay with this one. And this might be one not only that you might want to listen to again and download the podcast or go to the YouTube channel and watch it, but also send it to someone else that you know is saying, I'm really not happy about my job, but I don't really know what to go. The economy that I prepared for is fading away. There's a new economy. I don't really know how to adapt. I don't know how to fit my skills and my accomplishments and my passion into this new economy. And so this is something we're going to spend some time talking about. The book is just full of very good practical material that would help you begin to love your work. And of course, that's the title of the book. We'll come back and continue our conversation with Robert Dickie and his book, Love the Work, right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, freedom of association has been an issue in so many of the religious liberty cases over the last few years. Should a baker, florist, or photographer be required to perform their artistic services for an event that is contrary to their moral stance? In most of these cases, government officials say that a person's moral objections to same-sex marriage cannot be a justification. If someone disagrees with what a homosexual or lesbian couple believes and wants to do, too bad. You must be forced to do something that violates your conscience. If you do not, you face fines and even bankruptcy. It is worth keeping this in mind as we now witness the reactions from people who do not want to participate in the inauguration of Donald Trump. Ben Shapiro talks about the social media reaction when the Radio City Rockettes were told they had to perform at the Trump inauguration. One Rockette complained about being forced to perform for a man that stands for everything we're against. She concluded with this statement, "We're not going to be forced." George Takei complained on Twitter that they were being forced to go along with something horrible that they did not choose. We can add to these comments other statements by prominent figures that they won't eat at a restaurant hosted by Trump Tower and they won't stay in a Trump hotel. Fashion icon Andre Leontali announced that he wouldn't dress Melania anymore. Now, Ben Shapiro writes that suddenly the left has discovered the concept of freedom of association. After years of telling religious people they had a moral and legal obligation to throw out their religion and serve same-sex weddings, provide contraception, and fund abortion, the left now realizes that their ability to pick and choose those to whom they give their services is actually quite vital. Reactions to the Trump inauguration provide some important examples of why freedom of association is important. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And once again, privileged to have with us today Robert Dickie, president of Crown Financial Ministries. His previous book, The Leap, this one called Love Your Work, 4 Practical Ways You Can Pivot to Your Best Career. And there are all sorts of diagrams you use, kind of Venn diagrams. We have circles. And one of those is the comparison between your old career and your new career. There used to be this idea that, well, I have my job in one category and my purpose or my passion in the other. In other words, I might like fly fishing, but I'm not going to be working in a fishing store. I might like stamp collecting, but I'm not going to have a stamp collecting store. I recognize that those are just going to be separate. But you're talking about in the new career, more and more people are saying, I want my purpose and my job to intersect. And so that is to say, where are my scales, my gifts, my passion, my interest, my purpose, and how can that fit with my job? Can you explain that?
Yes. So we're really seeing this being kind of remade because of the millennial generation. They're entering the workforce with this deep desire to really want to connect their passions and their purpose and to make their life meaningful in all phases of life. And interestingly enough, we're seeing the baby boomer population, as they're kind of in the tail end of their career, they didn't start their career thinking like this. I mean, this was not how the world was set up when they were 18, 19 years old. But they're looking at their encore career and they're saying, hey, I want to do something, but I definitely don't want to just punch a time clock. I want to make sure that I'm tapping into my passions and my skills and really love what I'm doing. So we're seeing this current within the American workforce, and I even go so far as to say we're seeing it in pockets globally, where people really want to make sure that there's a big overlap between both their passions and skills and knowing that they're having an impact in the world around them. And one of the things that I'm counseling business leaders to do is this is really incumbent upon business leaders and management to really be able to connect the dots. So it's quite possible that a company could lose its top talent if they are not sharing with their staff the impact that company is having socially, the way in which that company is serving the community, whether you are making car parts, whether you are a nonprofit, whether you're in the food service industry, it doesn't matter. I sat down and I was able to hear the former CEO of Ritz-Carlton, and he was talking about how he trained his employees to give incredible service to the men and women who would come and stay at the Ritz-Carlton. And what he had done is he had done a fantastic job of connecting the dots of every single person on this team matters. What you do matters to the people who are staying here in this hotel. They had the highest retention rates, incredible customer service reviews, and he helped Ritz-Carlton grow from a very small hotel to one of the top blue-chip hotels globally today. I think that more of that needs to be done with management around the world.
Well said. One of the other things you talk about, and this again relates to some of the great material available at Crown Financial Ministries, is the difference between a poverty mindset, a prosperity mindset, and a stewardship mindset. And again, this is where I think it's great to get the book because you can see all of this on a chart. But can you explain the difference? Because sometimes Christians themselves kind of veer into one of those extremes and don't really understand that really what God wants us to have is a stewardship mindset. Can you explain the differences?
Well, absolutely. And the stewardship mindset really is this middle ground where God has given us, it's not just a stewardship of the financial abilities that God has given us or the financial resources, but it's also the stewardship of our gifts and talents, probably the most important resource that he's given us, the gift of life. And so in the book, I really try to unpack that God has uniquely made all of us. He's given us a mission. He's given us something here on this planet to do. And if we're going into our work and we are upset, we're disenfranchised, we don't feel like we're giving it our best, then we're not being a steward of this resource that God has given us. He works through us to impact others and to impact the world. And so the stewardship mindset is everything that we do, whether it's a small task or a big task, whether it's important or wherever it might be in the middle, that we work because it's part of our relationship with our Creator God, and we give Him our absolute best. And He's going to continue to bless us and give us opportunities, but to be absolutely faithful in the stewardship of those resources. Now, when you go into, there's two sides of the equation, obviously. There's, if you travel to different parts of the globe, even here within the United States, there are some who have a poverty mindset. They believe that they'll never be able to achieve anything else in life. They have this limited mindset. They also believe that having wealth or having any type of success is evil, which that's just not correct. The flip side of that coin, we see it here in the U.S. and around the globe as well. There is the prosperity gospel. This gospel of name it, claim it. God wants us to be rich and wealthy. If you're not wealthy, there's just something wrong with your faith. We also realize that is an incorrect interpretation of gospel, and that's not right as well. So the real the thread of the gospel, where God wants us to be, where I believe that we're taught in Scripture, is that we're to be stewards of the resources that He's given us, financially and our life. That's what's important.
I just mentioned some of that can also be found in their seminar on the Bible and money, but let's move on to this idea of pivot, because that's the subtitle of your book, 4 Practical Ways You Can Pivot to Your Best Career. And you talk about that we really have 4 career quadrants, if you will, having to do with your passion and your opportunity. And that might be helpful because a person needs to understand kind of where they are in those circumstances. Can you kind of explain that for us?
Absolutely. The quadrant that we want to be in, this is, again, me working with a number of different people around the country. I kind of got to understand, these individuals who were successful at what they were doing, they were happy, they were living in alignment with how God had made them, they were having impact in their communities. I realized they had high passion for what they were doing. And there was a great deal of opportunity to serve others, opportunity to do well, opportunity to take care of their families. And I was like, wow, they're in this sweet spot. They're in this zone of constant renewal. This is the place where we want to get in our career. It's quite possible for everyone to be in that zone. Now, once we find ourselves in that zone, if we're complacent, if we don't continue to add skills and continue to work hard, it's very easy for us to fall out. Now, what will happen is all of us will find ourselves in one of the other three quadrants at some point in our life. And I chronicle this in the book. So let's start with one of those quadrants, the reinvent quadrant. This is the quadrant where you have low passion for what you're doing and low opportunity. This is where you need to completely reinvent yourself. Maybe you were in an industry and you loved your job a long time ago, but it's changing. Maybe that job has been outsourced or the company has been gone out of business, and you find yourself in this crisis situation. There are very practical steps that you need to take to quickly reinvent yourself and to get into another spot within the economy. And so that's the reinvent quadrant.
And so the others are like revector and repurpose. And so in revector, it's like you have high passion but low opportunity. The repurpose is you have high opportunity but low passion. So again, those require some action steps as well, don't they?
They really do. And it's a little bit different. Each one of them has a different plan of action. You know, the thing that I really like in the book, the example that I really like is the one with Todd Williams. He was a two-time Olympian.
Right.
I actually ran with him at the University of Tennessee. And what he did, he was in the revector quadrant. At the end of his career, he was highly passionate about what he was doing. But as an athlete, he could no longer perform at the Olympic level. Well, what he was able to do is he was able to take all of his past successes, the contacts, everything that he had done within that space, and he just pivoted ever so slightly to do something different. He's now created a different career for himself, not doing something different, but just something, a slight alteration, and he's having an enormous amount of success. He's having huge impact in communities around the country. Another example, so let's take the exact opposite example. A person who was in the repurpose zone. I talk about Daniel Hedrick in the book. This was a guy who was at the top of his career, tons of opportunity. He was about ready to be made partner, the youngest law firm partner at his law firm. He walks in on the day that he was going to be made partner, and he tells the guys, you know what, I feel like God's calling me to do something else. I'm turning down this opportunity. I want to become a pastor. So he went to seminary. He's finishing up right now at Baylor University, Truett Theological Seminary, and he's becoming a pastor, and I chronicle that entire story. And the interesting thing there, he said, Bob, you know what? I had all of this experience, law degrees, all these things I had been doing in the sector of law. I thought that I was never going to use it again, and God's actually opening up doors of opportunity for me to be a pastor, but to still use my law degree into service in that community. So it's interesting how God a lot of times will use our past in our future.
That's certainly the case. Let's take a break, and when we come back, Robert Dickie with us, and we'll open up the phones if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We have a lot more to cover because we want to help you understand a little bit more about some of your career skills, how to make it happen, some of the currents of growth and opportunity. How can I leverage this? And again, I think you're going to find this book very helpful. In some respects, is the prequel, as we said, to The Leap, really looking at some of the practical ways you can pivot to your best career. Love Your Work is the title of the book. It's published by Moody, 200 pages. And again, you can find out more on our website, pointofview.net. As we go there, I hope you'll also click on that button that says donate. We'll be back right after this.
I remember when I could take a family of 4 out for a simple dinner, and the bill came to around $10 for all of us. That was only about 15 years ago, believe it or not. Now, no way. But here and there, we still go out because it's kind of important to us as a family. Well, I believe that point of view is important, an important investment in all of our families. This is a unique and special time together each weekday. Kerby equips us to make a difference and keeps us aware of what's important to our families. Today, I urge you, many are watching from the sidelines. We need you in the game. Some give. If that's you, thank you. Many need to step up. Join the team, Truth Team 360. You can learn the details at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, click on Become a Monthly Partner. That's right next to the Donate Now button. Become a Monthly Partner. We need you on the team. Please join us. Pointofview.net. Or pick up the phone, call 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Robert Dickie. His book is entitled Love Your Work. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to California first. KNLB and Shelley. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hello. I'm 54, but I've been in bad health for 20 years. I signed up for college when I was 18 and pregnancy prevented, and it took me 36 years and 5 attempts at 3 colleges, but June I finally graduated.
Congratulations. That's great.
Yay, me!
It shows perseverance.
AS in Business Administration and an AA in Economics, and I was 1B shy of a perfect 4.0, so I'm very proud of myself.
Wow.
My dream was to open a program for homeless veterans. I saw a program on PBS that veterans without addictions were falling through the cracks, and it just really broke my heart. Here they are strong enough to avoid, using drugs or alcohol to dull the pain, and then they got penalized for it. My problem is, I graduated, I'm so excited, go team. With my health problems, my multiple chemical sensitivity has gotten so bad that I have a problem being around people. The average person puts like 15 toxins on their body every day, and I'm allergic to them all. And I don't know what to do with my education because I can't really be around people.
Sure. Well, I was just thinking about your book, The Leap, where you talk about a full-time career and a part-time economy, too. So both these books would be helpful to Shelley, I think, because some of the best opportunities are now sort of online opportunities, aren't they, Robert?
They really are. And so, Shelley, first of all, I just want to say congratulations on the grit and determination to get your college degree. That's fantastic. I'm so proud of you. And one of the things I'd also highlight is don't be discouraged, because as Kerby was just mentioning, the freelancer economy is exploding right now. And, there's actually programs for a myriad of coaching opportunities and mentors in an online environment. I mean, we at Crown actually offer career direct coaching. We've got consultants all over the world that do it, and most of them do it from the privacy of their own home. And so they're coaching and mentoring other people via Skype or Zoom or some type of teleconferencing communications. So there's a way that you could be a coach, that you could mentor people. You never even have to leave your own home, and you could just dial in your video and have impact. And you could be helping. Imagine if you were able to pivot ever so slightly, and you're coaching and mentoring people, those veterans. I mean, I'm a veteran myself, and so it warms my heart to hear you talk about the passion that you have to help that community. So I would say, sitting back and drawing up a plan, there is absolutely a way you can have huge impact where you don't have to be around people and around those chemicals that might give you those issues.
So, Shelley, let me just say that if you have access to a computer, I'm sure you could go to our Point of View website, and we have a link to Robert Dickie, and maybe you could communicate there. Also, of course, let me just emphasize again some of the resources there at Crown Financial Ministries, because they really do provide some great career guidance. So those would be some great ways that I think you could probably benefit from some of the material that he has already made available.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Well, we wish you well.
And I appreciate your show and being a voice of truth out there.
Well, thank you. Again, I really do try as often as I can, Robert, say that we appreciate those who served in the military, and it does encourage me that she wants to serve those in the military, because they certainly have served us, and it's time for us to serve them. So I hope that she can get some help, and I know that maybe you two can even communicate offline and provide some opportunities for her and for other people to do something similar.
Amen. I look forward to it.
Let me come to a point you made in passing, but it's also something you talk about in the book. Become a lifelong learner, acquiring new skills. Now, I'm older than you are, as you well know, and I would have to say that I picked up a couple of new skills in my 50s. I picked up about 2 or 3 new skills in my 60s. So there isn't this idea that, and of course here we're talking about Shelley, who's in her 50s. It isn't like you graduate from college and then you stagnate for the rest of your life. You plateau for the rest of your life. One of the things that's going to help you be effective and help you pivot is to develop some of those new skills.
what's absolutely critical, Kerby, for us to be able to become lifelong learners. Now, the baby boomer generation, the world was not changing as fast as it is today. It was quite possible for people to graduate from college a few decades ago and then leverage that knowledge that they learned in their trade school, technical school, college through the majority of their career. One of my professors at Harvard Business School made a statement in one of our recent classes. He said, look, the shelf life of a college education today is about 3 years.
Yes.
What you learn when you graduate from college is relevant for about 3 years. If you do not stay plugged into your industry, if you do not continue to acquire new skills, read new books, listen to great podcasts, and it's not just learning those skills, but what college really teaches people is the art of how to learn and then how to apply those skills. And so we've got to be able to quickly leverage what we've learned in our career. And so that's the art of becoming a lifelong learner. So you have a very impressive educational background, Kerby. But as you said, even you, at where you're at within your career, you're still acquiring those skills. And my New Year's resolutions, I have a whole litany of things that I want to be able to do educationally this year because I want to acquire skills to make me a better father, a better leader, a better person here at Crown Financial Ministries. So this is absolutely critical for everyone, regardless of where we're at.
Well, we're talking about skills. Let's talk about soft skills for just a minute. You talk about emotional intelligence. Remember, years ago, a person handed me this book by Daniel Goleman on emotional intelligence, why it can matter more than IQ. And at the time, I thought it was intriguing. But then as I incorporated some of those ideas, I came to realize that some of people's successes and failures have nothing to do with their intelligence or their IQ, but more with their EQ, their emotional intelligence, if you will, and the ability to use skills to interact with individuals, to be confident in their person. And you included a number of pages in the book about that. Why so?
Well, I'm seeing that this is becoming a hot button issue globally. So I participate in a forum with global CEOs, and team conflicts, personality conflicts in companies around the globe are really causing drama and distractions. It's amazing. And we're entering in part of this new economy that's developing. There is an element of teamwork that is absolutely required, whether you are teaming with people via teleconferencing or whether you're working in small groups in an agile development setting within a company. But teams are becoming extremely important. The Lone Rangers, where they just kind of go off and operate on their own, that's a little bit of the relic of the past. People who do not know how to interface with others in a multicultural environment, being sensitive to other people's feelings and needs, and working well with others, communicating well with others, very quickly they're causing problems, and they just get asked to leave. Companies do not have the patience, I guess, to deal with an individual who's causing drama on a team. And so we're seeing more often than not, and this has been mentioned by multiple people, that your emotional intelligence is actually a better predictor of your success in the marketplace and in your career than your IQ. So people who can learn, and this is a muscle that we can grow, just like going to the gym and working out, Kerby. If we feel like we're not a really strong, emotionally intelligent person, we get emotionally hijacked and get upset. We don't deal well with others. This is something that we can put an action plan in place, and we can learn how to get better here. God can give us grace and patience. This is an area where we can all grow and become better.
You've also said that if you're not sure what skills would be helpful in your career, you would encourage people to think about adding one of these three areas: a foreign language or technology, that'd be like coding and things like that, or some general business background. And so it seems to me that sometimes you have to say, what might be something that would give me an advantage over someone else or open a door that currently is closed? So when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more, also take some more phone calls. And if you are just joining us, talking about this excellent book, Robert Dickie, Love Your Work, 4 Practical Ways You Can Pivot to Your Best Career. And it is in some respects a prequel to a book that he has made available before, and we've done interviews with him in studio before, called The Leap, Launching Your Full-Time Career in a Part-Time Economy. Both are published by Moody, both about 200 pages. We have links so that you can certainly find them, but you might also be able to find them in your local bookstore. And if you'd like to communicate with Robert Dickie or the people at Crown Financial Ministries, we have those links to those as well, and it's all available at our website, pointofview.net. Let me also encourage some of you to maybe go back and listen to this again, or pass this on to a friend that is sort of thinking about what he or she might do in the future. That podcast is very easy to download and then forward to someone, or the link to the YouTube channel, and I hope that you'll take the time to benefit from it, but also consider maybe someone you know that would benefit from this interview. It's the first of the year. It's when we're making resolutions. It's a time to maybe think, maybe God has something else even better for you in the future. We'll come back with some phone calls right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. A woman in Indiana has attempted to use that state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act to justify her abusive behavior, but it didn't work. Kin Park Thang was charged with neglect of a dependent and battery on a juvenile after allegedly disciplining her children by beating them with a hanger. The beating was necessary, she argued, to ensure that her son would be right with God for his immoral actions. Part of Thang's defense was rooted in the Indiana RFRA, suggesting that the state was substantially burdening her religious exercise by charging her with abuse and neglect for the way she chose to discipline her children. Thankfully, RFRA does not sanction abuse, neglect, or other violent acts. RFRA provides a check on government when its actions substantially burden the free exercise of religion, demanding that the state demonstrate a compelling justification for its actions. There can be little that is more compelling than protecting against the abuse and neglect of children. In other words, RFRA worked. The state was able to easily demonstrate why they were compelled to charge Thang for her abusive behavior, and Thang pled guilty to battery. The next time someone tries to convince you that RFRA laws can protect child abusers, remind them of Thang's story. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
More people today are saying Americans don't really need religion, but America does need religion. Religion helps the economy, families, and even national security. Learn more by reading Saving America, 10 Reasons Religious Freedom is the Key to Our Nation's Future. You can download this free booklet at firstliberty.org/Saving America. That's firstliberty.org/Saving America. Discover 10 ways religion benefits America at firstliberty.org/Saving America.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes with Robert Dickie as we talk about his book, Love Your Work. Let's go back to the phones. We'll go to Arkansas this time. Jackie, thank you for joining our conversation today.
Well, I'm an older lady. I don't know what to do next. I've worked doing accounting for 45 years, but I'm overqualified now. I've worked substitute teaching, but it's spotty. You don't get it all the time. Mm-hmm. I've worked as a PCA. I've done, since then, I've done a lot in the past, and I was asked on one job interview, which job didn't you like? And I said, I actually liked everything I've done. I enjoy people. I enjoy numbers. I enjoy just whatever I get into.
Well, you could do well then, yeah.
But, I'm wanting to find something that I can stick with for at least probably another 10 years.
One of the things I was thinking about, Robert, I know individuals right now that oftentimes offer their accounting or bookkeeping services to a multiple number of small businesses or ministries or things of that nature that really don't have the financial resources to hire or to have a full-time bookkeeper. Is one idea, but in your books, you've got some like Jackie or others could find some possibilities, right?
Absolutely, and I love the idea that you've just come up with. I mean, the outsourcing of HR is a big industry right now within the United States, and as you mentioned, Kerby, a lot of small businesses that are starting are looking for a great accountant, someone who can come in and manage the books. I mean, the quickest way to crash a business is not to have your books done correctly, and so I think there's a really great story here, Jackie, that if you wanted to market yourself in the local area as that resource, I mean, Crown has actually used freelance accountants to come in and help us part-time on projects that we've needed help with. So highly recommend looking into what Kerby was just mentioning. Something else that kind of jogged my mind here as you were talking, I mean, you highlight a number of things that you've done in your past, and you've liked all of them. You obviously have some skills and some training. I'm curious if you've done any type of career assessment or analysis of really what you're gifted at, right? So, and the reason I bring that up is this is something that Crown does with our Career Direct Assessment, really helping individuals understand how God uniquely made them and crafted them. So as you're looking for this next career, and you're saying you want to have some longevity there, a few years, maybe 10 years, the Venn diagram or the three circles, you want to find an intersection. How can you get an intersection of what you've done in the past, leverage all of that momentum that you've built up? Also, the intersection of the circle with your skills and your talents. But then the other one would be your passions. And God has implanted into all of us a passion for something. And so when we can find out where those three circles intersect, that's going to be the sweet spot. That's going to be the zone where you want to be in, where you're going to have great opportunity and success. So I would encourage you to try to figure out where all three of those intersect. And I know God's got a plan for you, and you're going to have a great career in the next 10 years.
Jackie, thank you for calling.
Thank you.
And again, I would encourage Jackie or any of our listeners to get that career assessment. It's just so helpful. And since we're just about to the end, your last chapter talks about the long gear, small steps to success. What you need to do, Robert, is take that first step. And sometimes that first step in a different direction is part of the pivot that you needed to have taken years ago. But we can't solve what happened in the past, but we can make good decisions about what we're going to do in the future, right?
We really can. And I go into a lot of detail on this particular topic in the book. It's about reframing our stories and our narratives. And so many times people have a story about a failure or a mistake, or I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have gone to school, wish I would have made a different career decision. And all of that is wasted energy, Kerby. And so what we have to do is we have to reframe that and realize everything that we did in life, these are all experiences that God uses those to make us and mold us and refine us. And so once we learn from a failure, it is no longer a failure. It becomes a part of our education. And so making that decision to go to the next step and say, you know what, I can't change the past, but I'm going to look at what God has for me in the future. I'm going to learn from the past and make that decision and make that first step. Finding the long gear. This is a mountain climbing analogy. Trying to get to the summit of a big mountain, if you just stand at the foot of this big mountain and look at it, it looks almost insurmountable. And our careers can feel the same way. But if we take consistent, small steps, day after day after day, before you know it, you're standing on the summit. You've achieved your goal. And so that's what we need to do. We need to make a decision, and then we need to have constant action of taking small steps. And so that's what I'm encouraging folks to do within this book.
Might just mention at the back you have all sorts of resources on dealing with resumes and websites, finding a new job, funding for startup or side projects, education, as well as all sorts of books that you've referenced. But just before we go, let's also talk about some of the great resources available through Crown Financial Ministries. So what can people find when they land there?
Well, people obviously know us because of Chuck Bentley being on the radio. He's our CEO, and he gives just great financial advice every single day on how to manage the finances that God's given us and manage our budgets. We've got a number of great Bible studies that cover those particular topics. One of the resources that I mention frequently in the book, I highly recommend, is Career Direct. And you can actually take an online assessment and get a 35-page personal report that's tied to your unique personality and your skill set. With all sorts of resources. And there's a lot of people who get this report and say, you know what, I want a consultant. I want someone who's trained in this area to walk me through the steps and to help me craft a career plan. And I believe getting a Career Direct consultant to go through this at the beginning of the year to kind of craft a game plan and a plan for the rest of the year is one of the wisest things that we can do. So that's another one that I would highly recommend from Crown Financial Ministries. It's called Career Direct. You can find that on our website at crown.org.
Yes, I would highly recommend Career Direct. And again, I would recommend both the books. The earlier one that we mentioned, The Leap, and this one, Love Your Work, 4 practical ways you can pivot to your best career, both published by Moody, about 200 pages each. And I would say that those are great ways to get you started in the right direction in this new year. So Robert Dickie, always appreciate the great work that you do. It was great to have you in studio last time. And let's see if we can get you in studio again. But it's great to talk with you by phone. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. And Kerby, I just want to say I really appreciate your work as well. So keep up the great work, and God bless in the new year.
Thank you so very much. Just before we go, let me mention that this is a resource that I hope that you will take advantage of. And we also thought it might be something where you might want to download the podcast or send people to the YouTube channel so that you could benefit from it. But others that you know that are saying, I'm not sure this is the career that I should have chosen. About 80% of the people that have been interviewed say that they would change jobs if they could. So let me encourage you to, if you are not one of those 80%, find somebody who is and pass some of this material on. Just one of the services we wanted to provide to you here at Point of View. And tomorrow I might just mention we're going to be talking about the millennial generation. We're having our first official millennial roundtable. Although we've done these kind of in an unofficial way before. So I really encourage those of you that are under the age of 40 to pay attention. But even if you're over the age of 40, this will help you understand the young generation and why we really want to reach them as well. And we've talked a little bit about that today. Matter of fact, one of the people that endorse the books, Allie Beth Stuckey, she'll be with us by phone. We'll have a couple of others, Nick Pitts in studio, and we'll have Chelsea Yeoman join us by phone, and it'll be a good conversation, and we're looking forward to that. So all of it available at our website, pointofview.net. I want to thank everybody who's been involved in this program today. Those of you that called early actually heard Warren Kelly, our president, answering the phone, but then Elisa came in, Shamila, but most importantly, I want to thank Andrew for engineering it and staying with us all through the program. We're certainly blessed to have so many working behind the scenes. So we'll see you back here tomorrow.
The end of the book of Jonah is really strange. God said there were 120,000 people in Nineveh who didn't know their right hand from their left. And yet today in America, many of our major corporations and politicians are fighting a war to permit men to use women's showers and bathrooms. Once you deny God as the measure of all things, you can't even recognize the most basic realities. America is in a battle for its sanity and survival. We need strong voices to tell the truth. We need Point of View. Become a partner in this important mission of speaking truth in love. Please, today is the day. Click the Join the Truth Team button at pointofview.net. Choose your level of giving and be an important part of the team bringing America the truth she so desperately needs. Take that step. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I'm constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.